we've got to talk about Walton Goggins. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that Walton Goggins is having like a serious moment right now. His house was recently featured in Architectural Digest, which was honestly incredibly cool, and that tour is totally worth watching, by the way. He's also been in like all of the magazines, which frankly, not upset about. I do think it's kind of interesting that he's like suddenly blowing up because he's been a really famous and successful actor for a very long time. But I guess that's what happens when you're in the White Lotus. Like the White Lotus effect is real. I watched it. Everybody I know watched it. And I will say that this season in particular, the clothes were just incredible. I took so many screenshots of outfits that I wanted to replicate and also did spend a not insignificant amount of time trying to source like specific pieces that were on the show, which is how I learned that a lot of the clothes that were in the season were actually vintage, which I think is incredibly cool. It's like a little bit annoying because I want to own them and I can't because they're one of a kind and you can't find them. But it's also really cool that the costume designer sourced so many really amazing vintage pieces. Honestly, I could talk about the clothes in this season for a really, really long time. I could do a whole video just about Amy Lou Wood's clothes alone because they're like so good. But the person who was the most heavily screenshotted for me was Walton Goggins. Something about the way his character was dressed throughout this season spoke to me in a way that made me immediately go to the internet and have to buy a Hawaiian shirt. And I can honestly say I have never wanted to wear a Hawaiian shirt before. So if you, like me, were very inspired by this whole vibe, I'm gonna talk about how you can recreate it and make it work for your wardrobe if you're not a 50-year-old male celebrity. I think the first thing we need to address here is that not all Hawaiian shirts are created equal. And there is a huge difference between this and this. It's like one of these versions is just so cool and fun and interesting and feels like totally laid back and just like cool. And the other one is very much not that. I do have a lot of thoughts on why that is, and I will get into that specifically in a minute. I will also share some specific vintage options that I've found that I think fall into that cool category. But before I do that, I think we need to spend a minute talking about what makes this whole outfit work. Because it isn't just the Hawaiian shirt. That's obviously like the main staple item of this outfit. But there's a lot of things going into why this whole thing works together and creates this very specific kind of vibe. One thing that is helpful in reverse engineering this look is that his character basically wears a uniform for the entire season. And honestly, I think we can almost forget about the bottom half of every single one of these outfits. It's just like pants and sandals. I think you could do so many different iterations of this. I will talk about kind of my vision in a bit, but the important part of this look is really just the top half. And that, I think, can be broken into a few key components. Obviously, you have the Hawaiian shirt, which is always like aggressively unbuttoned. Some jewelry, which really boils down to like a necklace, maybe a ring, maybe a watch, very simple. And like a pair of sunglasses, which he often has tucked at the very bottom of that deep, deep V. In terms of actual like component parts, it's not that complicated. It is a very limited number of pieces, and I think within them you have a lot of room to play and interpret and adapt this to your personal style or things that you already have. I'm going to talk about all of these things, and we're going to start with the hero item, which is the Hawaiian shirt. Like I said, I have done like hours of digging for these on eBay and Etsy, and I have picked up a few little guiding rules along the way. I think the first thing to address here is that Hawaiian shirts have been a thing for many decades. You can find versions of these as old as the 1940s, and obviously as recent as probably like last year, which is not vintage, but you see my point. In general, I have had better luck looking on the older end of the spectrum. I think for whatever reason, the older versions of these read a little bit cooler than the newer versions, like from 2000 on, which can give a little bit more of that like lame dad energy, which is not what we're going for. The other thing that I think is really important is color. Obviously, by definition, these shirts are really colorful, and you can find them in like every single color on the face of the earth. Obviously, like you should get what speaks to you, but if you're trying to go for this like Walton Goggins vibe, I would stay away from any really bright neon colors. Just about every one of these he wore in the show has a pretty muted color palette. So like the colors within one shirt are not super high contrast and tend to be pretty close to each other in the tonal range. You also really have to think about pattern when it comes to looking for these. I think you can almost lump the patterns that these shirts come in into like 4 distinct categories. The first is florals, which are the easiest to find. There are so many floral Hawaiian shirts out there in the world. Personally, these are not my favorite. I do think there's a way to make the floral version of this cool, but they also have a tendency to read a little bit more feminine because they're florals. And part of what speaks to me about this look is that like hyper masculine energy that Walton is bringing to it. As someone who is not a 50-year-old man, I don't have that masculine energy. So I feel like the best way to offset that is to pick a pattern that doesn't read quite so literally, stereotypically feminine. The second category of pattern that I've picked up on is like non-floral plants. There's lots of like botanical plant patterns out there. These to me feel like a better avenue compared to the florals. The third category is like other natural things that aren't plants. It's not a great category name. I never promised you that. But it's things like birds or animals or volcanoes, mountains, clouds, things like that. Like things that occur in nature but aren't plants. This to me is like, this is our bread and butter. This is where we're gonna find the coolest versions of these shirts. And the last category is the one category that I am calling like well and truly out of bounds. Like we're not gonna do this, we're not gonna go here. And that's like very on the nose, like Hawaiian tourist shirts. So it's things like hula girls and tiki torches and pineapples. To me, there's just something about this that like simultaneously feels uncool and also kind of problematic. And like I said, I would honestly just steer clear of this category altogether. One other thing that I think is kind of valuable to keep in mind here in regards to pattern is there's kind of 2 categories, like really symmetrical, neat, ordered patterns and like totally organic mismatch patterns. To me, the mismatch patterns read cooler. It gives a little bit more of that like laid back, casual, undone energy. The symmetrical ones, I think they can be cool. I'm not gonna say like rule them out altogether, but there's more of a risk of it looking almost like a rockabilly bowling shirt, which isn't what we're going for. Like this shirt, for example, very symmetrical pattern. I would put this in that botanical category. Like these are obviously plants, but they're kind of funny looking and not overtly feminine. But the symmetry here is doing a lot. It's almost hard to notice anything but the symmetry because you have those very distinct stripes running straight down the front of the shirt. This one isn't bad. This to me still feels like it has some cool things going on, but it's not as good as some of the other options that I found. And I do contribute that almost entirely to the symmetry. I think the color palette of this is actually really nice. The fit is good, but it's not like hitting that perfect ideal, especially when you compare it to something like this, which is also botanical, but doesn't have that really distinct orderly pattern. And I think that's doing a lot for this particular shirt. I'm a big fan of this green mixed with these like muted yellows, pinks, oranges. I think it's a really nice color palette. But because the pattern is just all over the place, it's not drawing your eye to any one specific thing. And the result of that is that it just reads a lot more laid back. I did find another one of these same shirts on eBay for slightly less money. Yeah, I think this is a really great shirt. It's a little bit on the expensive end of Hawaiian shirts, and I am gonna show options that kind of run the spectrum in terms of price. So these ones in the like 170, 200 range, definitely on the steeper end. On the total opposite end of the spectrum, price-wise, I did find one of these shirts that is floral, but not overtly so, and I think is giving the same kind of vibe as this shirt. I think part of what's working here is the color palette. It's really muted, it's like very tonally consistent, and none of the colors are overtly feminine. It's not like bright pink or bright yellow. The shade of blue is almost like vintage Levi shade, which I think is really nice and would make this actually pretty easy to wear. It almost reads as a neutral, which I just think makes it a little bit simpler to wrap your head around. I think in particular because the flowers on this are like almost a gross color, it's making it cooler. It's not reading as just like a floral blouse, which is a good thing. Moving out of the botanical category and into our third and favorite category, which is non-plant nature, I found so many of these shirts that I liked that have cranes on them, like birds. And Walton actually wears one in the White Lotus that does have a crane print, and this was honestly the shirt that I saw and was like, I must own this. And I have found a bunch of these that I love. This red one is one of my favorites. I think the pattern is super cool. I love the red. I love the cranes. Again, this is like a very organic pattern. There is no symmetry here, which I personally love. And yeah, just this one's great. $130, which I think is pretty decent. It is silk. Some of these are rayon. I honestly, personally, don't think it makes that big of a difference. As long as it looks soft and like it would drape really nicely, you don't want something that's really like starchy and stiff. That's just gonna sit really boxy and not give that like loose, deep V that we're going for. As long as it's giving that, I personally wouldn't over-optimize for silk versus rayon. If you care about that, great. You can find both options. You can definitely add that to your search term and just filter based on that. But this one is silk, so $130 for that I think is actually pretty reasonable. It's an extra large, and I realize I haven't talked about size really yet, and I think the way you want to go here, granted these are almost entirely men's shirts. If there are women's versions, personally, I wouldn't opt for that. Traditionally, most clothes that were made for women are cut to be more tailored, like nipped in at the waist. And again, what we're going for here is that like casual masculine energy. So I think the straighter these hang, the better. I think of it almost as like, what would you wear to the beach? Or like to get a cocktail on the beach while you're on vacation. So like very loose, airy, like not close fitted to your body. Another red bird one. These aren't actually cranes, these are hawks, which I think is really cool. It has a very similar kind of vibe to the last one, but the color palette's a little bit different. You still have that base red, but you have a lot more green and blue. And I think this is so cool. You could so easily wear this with a pair of jeans, a pair of running shorts. Like I said, I think the bottom half of the outfit you make with this is almost irrelevant. Like you could wear this with jeans, trousers, shorts, a skirt, and I think it's going to look cool as long as you hit these other kind of style requirements. This one is also silk, and it's only $70, which honestly is a really good price for these. Moving out of the red color palette, but staying within our bird theme, we have this one, which is, I think, really, really nice. It is expensive. Frankly, for me, $300 for a Hawaiian shirt is too much money, but if you can afford it, I think this is a great option. I like how big the cranes are on this. Like it's a really oversized pattern. And I think this mid-tone blue, again, kind of like that floral version, is just really nice. It reads almost neutral. You could pair this with so many other colors, which makes it really versatile in terms of working it into your current wardrobe. Okay, last bird one. This one also has, I don't think they're cranes, I think these are hawks again, but you also have the addition of tigers, which, what is not to like about tigers? This one is actually from a store that I visited. It's the store where I ended up buying my own Hawaiian shirt. Obviously fewer options here than on somewhere like Etsy or eBay, but they have like a really nice selection of them. So if you don't want to do as much hunting, they've sort of done that heavy lifting for you. And I do really like this one. I think the color palette is really nice with that like khaki base, very, very neutral, but you still get these little pops of bright green and orange that prevent it from being too muted. Like there's still a lot of visual interest going on. And the pattern itself is pretty over the top. So I think the fact that it's a little bit more muted color-wise is a good thing here. While I'm on their website, I'm actually going to show you a couple of other options. This one I actually tried on in person. This was actually my runner-up, the one I would have gotten if I hadn't found the one that I ended up really loving. It does have that like striped symmetry thing going on, which is honestly why I didn't buy it. It's just not my favorite version of these. That said, this shirt was really nice in person. The fit was great. The color palette was great. It was super soft, like really, really liked it. They also have this one, which I think is really fun. Another crane shirt. I told you they're like very, very popular. The bird theme is very popular. That same bright red base. I like that it has these kind of curly waves going on. I think just the visual effect of that shape is really nice against that bright red background. So I'm a big fan of this one too. Going back to eBay and moving out of the bird category, but still staying in that like nature category, we have this green one with dragons on it, which I guess you could argue is not nature because dragons aren't real, but they are animals. So I don't know. I'll let you call that one. Regardless, I'm a big fan of this pattern. I think the dragons are really fun. I love the color palette of this, that it's that like two different shades of green with these little pops of that like really muted, it's almost like a mauve color. It's like not a color you would normally want to wear, but in this context, it's doing something really nice. I also like that this one has some non-nature related design. It has these little like ships and buildings, which I think is just creating some nice contrast. So big fan of this whole dragon situation. And finally, there's this one, which now that I am looking at it, there are definitely birds on this. It's mostly, in my mind, mountains or volcanoes. I don't know, I guess a volcano is a mountain. Is a volcano a mountain? If you know, go ahead and drop that in the comments. Regardless, this to me mostly reads as like a mountain theme. It has these kind of waves that aren't blue, which I think is kind of nice. It makes it not necessarily read as water. It's a little bit more abstract. But looking at this, there are definitely feathers on it. So this is also birds. But I think it's very cool. I like the color palette. I like that the pattern is so ambiguous. I mean, I didn't even realize it was birds, and I have been looking at this for a while. I do honestly think that like ambiguity works to your advantage when you're trying to create the Walton Goggins look. The other thing I think is critical in recreating the Walton Goggins is the jewelry. He seems to wear some version of this jewelry both in the show and in his life. And it's honestly really simple. It's like a necklace, a chunky ring, and a watch. And I don't necessarily think you need to recreate like these items specifically. I think you can treat them more like categories to fill. The only other requirement I think is kind of important here is that like masculinity of the individual items. It's not like a super cutesy, girly necklace. It's a chain. And the ring isn't like a dainty little stacking ring. It's pretty heavy. And his watch also is like, obviously it's a man's watch, but it has that like weight to it. So I think what you're really looking for here is heavier, more masculine pieces. Outside of that, I think like sky's the limit. You could do gold. If gold is your thing, you could also do silver. You could also mix and match your metals. You could do a watch, or you could also just do like a chunky chain bracelet. The point is that you can really kind of riff on this. I'm personally a big fan of a snake chain in this context, and snake chains you can find all over the place. I own both the gold and the silver snake chains from Lauren Stewart, and they're really, really great. They're like very high quality without being exorbitantly expensive. And I think snake chains are so simple. It's like a staple jewelry item. So you can have this and wear this forever. You can also find lots of vintage snake chains if you want to stick in the vintage realm. And like there's so much variety within the snake chain category. I did recently come across these ones, which I think are great. Like they're very, very cool, a decent price, sterling silver, would look great as part of your Walton Goggins summer. As far as like your wrists go, I personally am not a big watch person. So for me, I would opt for a bracelet in recreating this look. And I would just pick something that's like a chain. No charms, no like embellishments, just a simple chunky chain. This one I think is really nice. It's just got kind of like an interesting little detail. It's still a little bit more on that delicate side, but it has some like visual heft to it. So I think it would work great in this context. I also love this like rope chain. This one is solid gold, so it's a little bit more expensive, but a pretty good price for solid gold. This bracelet from Sophie Ratner is on my wish list. I think it's so cool. I love the texture of the chain. It's almost mimicking that like watch band look, which I think in this context is great. Like we're almost recreating the chunky gold watch without actually wearing a chunky gold watch. And frankly, I would wear this bracelet way more than I would wear a watch. I just need to save all my little pennies until I can afford it. The only other two parts of recreating this look are a chunky ring and sunglasses. And I'm not even gonna show you options for those because I don't think it matters. You can wear any chunky ring. I think the more important thing here is the styling of it. So I wouldn't wear like all of your rings. Maybe let that one chunky ring be that one ring on that hand. And I would put it on the same hand that you're wearing the bracelet. I think that matters. It's like we're creating this whole jewelry vignette on one hand. So what I'm saying is that I think the styling of this matters more than the actual item. Wear a ring that you already have. Doesn't matter what finger it goes on. Doesn't really matter what it looks like. If you are wanting to buy something for yourself, I personally love a signet. And a signet gives like a very masculine energy, so it would work in this context. Sunglasses are the same. Wear whatever sunglasses you have and like. Just be sure to clip them on your deep V when you take them off. And in regards to the deep V of it all, frankly, if you feel comfortable bearing that much chest, you wanna go like full Jenna Lyons, do it. It's summer. It's the time to have your shirt unbuttoned to your belly button. If you don't feel comfortable having that much of your chest on display, I think you have a couple of options. The first is to just wear like a cute lacy bra, something that will look really fun poking out of that deep V. And yes, that is feminine. And yes, that kind of goes against what I've been saying about like this masculine energy, but I think the contrast of it will work. In fact, I know it will work because that's how I've been wearing mine. You could also wear this over a swimsuit, and I think it would be really cool. Like especially if you're on vacation, like treat this as a cover up. Take it to the pool, and then when you're ready to go get lunch or a drink, just throw this over it and let your little bikini top poke out. Super cute. You can also just like do another button up. Don't have your V quite so deep. And that is all I have to say for now about Walton Goggins summer. I will definitely be partaking, and I hope you partake too. And if the Walton Goggins look isn't your thing, maybe you're more of an Amy Lou Wood and you want me to do a video on that, let me know. Because honestly, took a lot of screenshots of her too, and she wore so many good things that would be fun to try to replicate. That is all I have to say. And now I'm gonna go look at more shirtless pics of Walton Goggins on the internet.